afternoon, everyone. It's great to be with you. We're doing another Frontline Conversation with Tonia Wellons. Now, remember, a while ago, we hosted the VoicesDMV on the table conversation LGW did in partnership with the Greater Washington Community Foundation. But we were just one part of that. Hundreds of people around the region held these conversations to come up with ideas to help make the region more equitable, to help make the region better. And today we're going to learn from Tonia Wellons sort of the results of some of those conversations. And really what we're looking to do is come up with some action plans or action items to help people move forward to make the region more equitable, and to help move that along. The Greater Washington Community Foundation is sponsoring community action grants of up to $2,000 to individuals or groups to help put some of the plans or thoughts they came up with during their conversations into action. So I'm delighted to welcome Tonia Wellons. Okay, Tonia, here we go. Let's try it again.
Yes.
Tonia Wellons, class of 2020, an LGW board member, president and CEO of the Greater Washington Community Foundation. It's great to see you again. Thank you for including us, including LGW, Leadership Greater Washington, in this whole process. And I think we're off to a good start. I think we'll make it even bigger and better next year and get a lot more ideas. So let me, if I can I go back a little bit and talk about VoicesDMV? So this on the table is conversation is a continuation of something that you started several years ago. So can you talk to us about VoicesDMV and what that means and how that started?
Yes. So let me start by saying hi, Doug. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining this conversation, and a big thank you to those of you who were able to participate in VoicesDMV on the table conversations on October 1st. So about 3 years ago, actually 4 years ago, when I joined the Community Foundation, I joined, of course, as Vice President for Community Investment. And one of the first things I looked to do was to look around the country to see what other community foundations were doing when it came to broad-based community engagement. The Community Foundation has been an amazing partner to for many years, both as grant maker and as steward of donor resources. And I wanted to figure out how can we do more to engage the broader community, to do more deep listening so that we can better understand the attitudes and perceptions of people in our region, much like many community foundations like the Chicago Trust, like the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, like the Buffalo Community Foundation we're doing, Boston Foundation, we're doing when it came to both quantitative and qualitative indicators for community well-being. And so in 2017, we worked very closely at the time with the Urban Institute to put together I think that the urban survey was maybe 75 questions around a broad range of sort of thematic issue areas: well-being, economic mobility, discrimination, questions around how our neighbors are interacting with each other, with public systems like local government, state government, for example. We just wanted to know how members of our community were faring. And so the data work was then used to help to frame the Community Foundation's community investment strategy. And that strategy is used for lots of really important things within the Community Foundation, including it helps us to shape our grant making strategy, but it also provides the backdrop for one of the tools that we get to use as a community foundation, which I think is even more important sometimes than the actual grant making, and that's our influence model. You know, how do we influence donor behavior? How do we influence and engage with local government, with state government, and even with the federal government? It's understanding what our community is experiencing that allows us to do this and these things effectively.
So you started this in 2017, the VoicesDMV project, and then you talked some about how did what you did in 2017 influence what you were looking to do in 2020?
Right. So in 2017, it was mostly, let's just collect the data. And then we organized a few focus groups, Doug, to be able to deepen our understanding of the data and its specific kind of understanding of specific focus groups, issue areas. So we held focus groups with members of the LGBTQ community, members of the Asian community, members of the African American community, disconnected youth, communities that are less likely to participate in traditional survey research. We really wanted to pull those communities together so that we can listen even more deeply. And we use that again to influence our community investment strategy. And part of our commitment at the time, and it remains a commitment for us, is to offer this data collection, community engagement work as a public good. So once we did it in 2017, we said, okay, we're going to do it every couple of years to refresh the data, to look at comparisons, and even to some extent to see if we can create a community scorecard of sorts of how we're progressing on certain indicators over time. And it just happens that for the 2020 survey, we partnered with Gallup. We asked fewer questions, 65 questions, and decided to do a 3-part engagement strategy this time. So it's the survey, the data collection, it's the on the table conversations, which for us replaced what we were doing as focus groups. The idea was to get more members of community involved in small conversations around our report so that they could think together, and usually over a meal. So had it not been for COVID, we would have been spending time with the information and things that we've learned over a dinner or over a lunch. American University had planned to host, as many as 45 or 50 tables on the campus of students and community members, really just sort of creating a bit of sort of buzz and engagement around what our community needs. And then the third part are the Community Action Awards, which we'll spend a little bit of time talking about towards the end of our conversation.
So when I first heard about the on the table conversations, I was very excited because of what had happened in Chicago. Chicago started these, and can you talk about sort of what you learned from Chicago and what you wanted to do here?
Yeah, in 2014, I believe it was, the Chicago Community Trust sort of instigated On the Table, and it was really a bit of a civic holiday for members of the community, again, to get together and just focus on what they could do to make the community better. I think because we're in the Washington, D.C. region, we're probably talking about community often, but not necessarily in an actionable way. So that was the strategy. I think Chicago started with maybe 1,000 folk gathering for on the table conversations, and now as many as 100,000 people. They actually canceled their on the table conversations this year, but as many as 100,000 the last time they hosted on the table were gathering to really just talk about community and community engagement and things that they could do to improve community. And that's our hope here. We had virtually about 60 tables or so on October 1st, about 500 to 600 participants on that one day. We've had many conversations, and many of you have participated in them around a broad range of issues at the Community Foundation, where the VoicesDMV has been the backdrop. But on that day, we had maybe up to as many as 600 people in conversation about community. Our hope is to get as large as Chicago one day, but we have a little time to build up to that.
So how about your thought process going into this, where Chicago postponed theirs, not doing one this year, and you were planning to do in-person gatherings, and we were actually involved in that as well. And
Yep.
All of a sudden the pandemic hit, and you switched to virtual. Did you ever consider not doing it? Did you take us through all of that?
Yeah, we did, Doug. I guess like many organizations around town and around the nation, you're weighing whether you pursue something, push you forward on it, or whether or not you just decide to cancel and try again next year. There are just too many important things that are happening in the country, but in our nation's capital, which is where we fortunately sit, for us to not be thinking about kind of who we are and what we ought to do. And I think it's incredibly timely. Again, the timing was incredibly stressful for us because these were supposed to have happened over the spring and into the summer. but we decided that we would push it out until right now. And I can't think of a better time, quite frankly, given all of the things that are happening, within a stone's throw away from where we sit, to be thinking about community action. No matter what the outcome will be of the upcoming election, our community will be impacted, and we, as leaders in this region, will have an important responsibility to think through, how do we support our community? How do we engage to make sure that the resources that people, particularly those who've been disproportionately impacted by, COVID-19, the economic downturn, the calls for racial justice, and some of the challenges and questions that we're asking about our democracy, how we are represented and how we are presented. And the goal is to really create some agency, some individual agency to be able to do something.
So Leadership Greater Washington was very fortunate, thanks to the Community Foundation and to Gallup, to have a presentation for our members on the survey that was done this year. And it's really, I think, the last sort of great snapshot of what was happening in the region before the pandemic hit.
Right.
But we've got people on the call who are not part of that presentation. Can you talk to us about some of the highlights from the survey and what you learned from that?
Yes, you're right. So the survey, I think it actually concluded at the end of February. And I'll tell you, one of the questions we were asking ourselves is, okay, does this matter anymore? Everything changed from March 13th onward up until now. But it was interesting because so many shifts had already happened or begun to happen from 2017 to the very early part of 2020. And I'll give you some data points to back that up. So let's see, in 2017, our residents of different races had similar views on the local economy. 24% of white residents, 25% of Black residents, and 30% of Hispanic residents all said economic conditions in the Greater Washington region were getting better. And in 2020, Black residents were much likely to say that the economy was getting better. 41% of Washington area residents felt discriminated against within the last year. And then 7 in 10 residents felt that they were discriminated against because of their race. 45% of LGBTQ residents felt that they were discriminated against in the past year. So this theme around, and I think you'd appreciate it because of so much of the conversations that have been taking place through the LGW community have been about the impact of race and racism in our region. The data is bearing that out. And again, this data is pre-pandemic, it's pre-George Floyd, and it's pre all the calls for racial action. It's both the impact that members of our community were experiencing, both from an economic perspective and from a racial discrimination perspective, were well captured in this report.
So we took the report, you took the report, you sent it out to the people who were going to be doing these conversations. You said you had about 500 or 600 people virtually gathering on October 1st. And Leadership Greater Washington had one big conversation as part of that. What did you learn? What did you hear from these different conversations about the region and about where people's heads are at?
Yeah, I mean, I think we knew that there were so many things that are top of mind for members of our community. From the conversation that our community foundation hosted on racial equity and on workforce, and the challenges that sort of low-income hourly workers are facing in our region, to the conversations that were hosted at Howard University about the need for more African Americans, for example, to participate in clinical trials related to finding a vaccine for COVID-19. There's just a broad range of issues that sort of the hot topics for members of our community, and all of them are are super important. I mean, I think it just goes to show the amount of brain trust that's at play in our region, in our community, that, you know, and the push for answers and solutions. And you know, the one thing I'll say is, and this, if we can move into the Community Action Awards, and part of why we're doing it. So much of our work, and again, this is why we did the survey to start, Doug, is because we wanted to hear from people, you know, from members of our community who are not necessarily associated with a nonprofit, and who are not necessarily our donors, you know, which are two of our main, our fund holders are two of our main stakeholder groups. We just wanted to hear across broad socioeconomic levels, and across our geography what was top of mind. The survey led us to the Community Conversations, which are now leading us to the Community Action Awards, where we're hoping that members of our community can engage and you know, apply for small grants to get something going, to be able to work at a neighborhood level. And it's a rare opportunity because we rarely have the chance to make grants to individuals. And this is one of those rare opportunities where we have the opportunity, we've had the chance to do that.
So I do want to get into a lot of detail about the Community Action Awards, but before we do that, I want to ask Jay Shepley, who's the communications manager for Leadership Greater Washington. I was very proud of the LDW members who participated in the conversation that day, and they broke into small groups and talked about different topics. Jay was in on a group that was talking about food security. So Jay, if you want to sort of take us through what you all discussed and what you came up with, just so people get a sense of how these table conversations work.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Thanks, Tonia. So hi, everybody. Hi, LGW. One of the main themes of Voices DMV is the idea that powerful things happen when people come together. And it's all about supporting these neighborhood level projects and ideas and collaborations. So our group, we had Rising Leaders, LGW members, and we discussed the idea of creating an initiative called the Natchitoches Tank Region Action Van. We called that project the Natchitoches Tank Region Action Van because we wanted to center efforts at the mouth of the Anacostia River, which we acknowledge is a trading hub for Native Americans for centuries. And we wanted all of our ideas, we had so many ideas, workforce development, education, but we wanted to center the idea for the project in racial equity. So for example, you know, according to the Voices DMV report, in that report, Black residents, 14% of those are now substantially more likely to say they're finding it difficult or very difficult than white residents, just 4%, to get by financially. So the area we focused on in DC is predominantly Black, and we know that this is the area where the greatest impact may be made. You know, the Capital Area Food Bank just came out with a great report that showed an expected increase, 48 to 60% increase in food insecurity for families in our region in the coming year. So our idea was that we could apply for a grant to purchase a van that could be used to allocate surplus food from farms, food banks, restaurants, and grocery stores, and get those directly into the areas in Ward 7 and 8 where they're needed most, especially since a lot of our neighborhoods over here are food deserts. And we wanted to leverage partnerships and shared networks and to implement this CRM and SMS technology platform too, to help connect people with the food and other unrestricted resources and van delivery. So we do physically distanced pickups and drop-offs of food and other resources. So yeah, since Voices DMV is all about bringing people together, and you know, that's been a really wonderful thing that we've been doing here at LGW with Frontline Conversations, a chance to really hear from other people and connect. But you know, we also wanted to have an educational and workforce development component that helps connect community members. So anybody could drive the van, and it could be used to connect groups of all types for community building and philanthropic purposes. But the main focus would be on hunger. So it was a really enlightening conversation to hear from people about their ideas, what they care about, and where they thought we could make an impact. So it was outstanding. So thanks again for helping us facilitate this.
Great, Jay. Thank you very much. Let me now turn to Ben Murphy from the Greater Washington Community Foundation to talk about some of the other conversations that were held that day and give us some insights into what other people were talking about. Ben?
You do. Wow. October 1st was a whirlwind. I was able to pop in on a number of conversations. I know Tonia was in several herself. I actually had a great opportunity to facilitate one of the community foundation sessions focusing on small business support and really economic mobility for people of color in these pressing times. And some really interesting strategies that were suggested around those tables, really around navigation and how people can really be better aware of all the, the places that they can connect to resources to help either themselves, their families, or their neighbors. I also had an opportunity to pop in on a couple of the conversations that American University hosted for us. They hosted 14 tables for us. They're one of our fabulous Superhost partners. They were talking about some really cool stuff, including the potential to create a new scholarship for AU students who are facing food insecurity. There was another conversation I was able to pop into that was talking about this physiological safety and sort of mental health needs of immigrant and undocumented people in this time of political strife and everything that's happening. A really interesting conversation around the intersectionality of anti-otherness and COVID-19. Another really great conversation focusing in on community-based action research, mobilizing American University students to really try and deeply understand how COVID-19 and this pandemic is impacting the student body on a personal level, with the goal to really figure out how they can make recommendations back to American University to help to support the student body. So as you can see, it was a really diverse set of conversations that happened on the first, but I was really proud of the fact that they were all very action oriented. We had really great people trying to dive in to think about not just having a conversation for conversation's sake, but a conversation that will lead to action on a neighborhood level. And I'll just close up here again with an advertisement for our Community Action Awards. We're hoping that anybody that hosted an on the table conversation on October 1st is going to be applying for some funds through the Community Foundation to put some money behind the vision you see for the community. So it was a great day. And thanks again to Great Washington for all of your partnership.
And thank you very much. So Tonia, let's get to the Community Action Awards. It's, what's interesting about this whole process, VoicesDMV, on the table conversations, is it's geared towards action. You want action at the end. And you don't see that a lot. You see a lot of conversations with people, you see a lot of discussion, and then it's sort of like, okay, let's file a report, put it on the shelf, and forget about it. But what I love about this is that you are putting your money where your mouth is. You're putting grants of up to $2,000 for people to get involved in some of these actions. So again, what are the Community Action Awards, and what's the impact you think you're going to receive from them?
Sure. So, I'll just harken back to March, April, where our community really sprung into action in response to COVID-19. There were so many things about the pandemic that we didn't understand, but I'll tell you that members of community across public, private, nonprofit sectors really figured out they were trying to figure out how they could be supportive to community and members of community who were in need. Mutual aid societies kicked into action. Restaurant owners started to make meals for good and for frontline workers. I mean, it's the kind of spirit that we saw during the first couple of months, I'd say, of the pandemic, that we're trying to instigate ongoing and to keep some level of connective tissue to various members of our community ongoing. I'll tell you, Doug, what we're not trying to do. We're not trying to encourage people to start new nonprofits. As a funder, I can tell you there are lots of amazing organizations who are out there doing incredible work on behalf of various populations of people. We're really trying to instigate catalytic change and community connection at a hyper neighborhood level. We want people who either sit in neighborhoods or live and work neighborhoods or work in neighborhoods to connect with their neighbors, to think about what they can do to build more community cohesiveness right now. It's not to try to solve a long-term problem. We know that many of the issues that we face in our community are systemic. They're ongoing. They're going to take lots of important commitments, resources to solve for. This isn't that. This is really around civic leadership and community engagement to try and do something that builds community and helps to instigate change. And so, we're offering the opportunity for individuals, neighborhood groups like your civic association or your fraternity and sorority, your HOA, just you're a group of friends to say, hey, let's get together and do something to support this effort in our community or this need in our community. I know I've gotten several calls from people who want to put together a local farmers market in a place where there isn't one now, and they thinking that they can do it for the next 4 weeks or for several weeks in the beginning of the new year, to be able to offer up something that does not exist, that they think will be of use, enough need to the community. And we're trying to make this a low barrier for entry. So it's a very simple application that you get to, a form that you have to complete. I think there is a video that you get to upload to describe your project. And so in most grant rounds, there's a lot of sort of scrutiny around how it's written, your theory of change. We're not asking for that. We're just looking for good, novel ideas that are connecting community to have some agency to do something. The maximum award is $2,000, and we are funding up to $100,000 in grant resources toward this effort. So it's pretty exciting. It's new for us too. We haven't, we haven't done this before, but we've seen our other community foundation peers to implement these kinds of things around the country. And we think it could be good for the spirit and soul of our community too.
So do you have any other examples of things people could do I know we want original thinking here, but just sort of an idea of what does this really mean and how involved do I have to get to make this happen?
Sure. So there was we just did a quick peek at some of the things that are coming in or some of the inquiries we're getting, sort of an oral history of the sort of the Native experience in our region was one of the things that's been presented. There was a group that's interested in creating a mural to help sort of beautify a part of the city. Another suggestion was around sort of litter pickup, a database that would identify places where there's lots of litter in our region, so that more data and more information can be used to drive people to where pickups should be. I mean, it can be anything that's sort of large or small, again, that solves or responds to an issue that a specific neighborhood is being impacted by and wants to do something about. Or if you're just thinking, oh, I've always wanted to, to organize a cleanup around X, Y, or Z neighborhood. And if we just had a little bit of resources, it might just instigate us to kind of get other people involved in doing this. Again, small resources that can make a big impact and can really connect people one to each other. Churches are invited to apply. Again, it's a rare opportunity where we have, and for some people, $2,000 is absolutely nothing. For others, it's a pretty big deal to be able to apply this kind of resource to a community project.
So it's not limited to racial equity projects. It's sort of, what can I do to improve my surrounding community, my surrounding neighborhood, my block?
Absolutely, absolutely.
People who live here.
Absolutely. I mean, I think we wouldn't want to suggest that all the resources are going to go into the, high-end neighborhoods in our city, but it really is about what the challenges are that we can use, again, a small bit of resources and a lot of manpower or woman power to be able to get behind.
And what is the deadline for applications?
The deadline is, Ben, I'm going to invite you to put that in the chat box. It's November 2nd. I knew it was very close to Election Day. I just wasn't sure how close. So again, this is the time to use all that pent up energy that you might have and nervousness around what the elections will yield, to think in advance of knowing any kind of outcome, what we can do to be a resource to our community.
No, your timing is great. People are freaking out over this election.
Yes.
It's on everybody's mind. And here's something you can do to take your mind off election and put it to something good of helping your community get it in by November 2nd.
Yep, so, based on what's needed right now.
Yeah. So where do you see Leadership Greater Washington and our members playing a role in all this, in the awards?
I know that your members have such a deep connection to so many parts of our community. Nonprofit, I've seen in the chat, there's some nonprofit leaders who are on this call. Many, of course, are business leaders, just, leaders in the community. We really encourage Leadership Greater Washington members to spread the word. So if you're not interested in applying for a Community Action Award, but there are partners in your networks or in your circles or in the nonprofits that you serve on the boards of, or on communities that you kind of drive through, or people that tell them about it, encourage them to put forth an application, share it on Twitter and all of our social media outlets, the opportunity to apply, and really just encourage people to take some of this pent up energy around our politics that's around the corner from us and apply it, your best thinking about how we can really use our time and talent and treasure to do something in our immediate community.
And I've been very fortunate that you've allowed me to be part of the awards panel, making the decisions on these awards. So folks, you got an in with me if you will.
And thank you, Doug, for agreeing to serve as a reviewer. Yeah. We're hoping to get, a couple hundred applications. We really want people to feel like this is a chance for them to do something.
So we will get the word out with our LGW members. We will get all the links out to everybody, and we'll encourage people to apply. Anything else you think LGW, Leadership Greater Washington, should be doing as part of this?
I think those are great ways. If we can get you to do that, then we'll be more than happy.
So we do that. So you go through this, and when will the grants be awarded?
Very early next year. Okay. So the applications are submitted November 2nd. The review panel will meet in late November, early December. Awards will be announced, I imagine, in December, and then awards made in the beginning of 2021. A nice way to start the year to really work with your neighbors to get something done.
And expected to be completed by first half of the year, or?
I'd say the first quarter of 2021, or early spring.
Okay, that's great. So let's flip forward a year now. What are your plans for the next? Are you planning on having on the table conversations next year? Are you planning on doing the Community Action Awards next year as well, or what? Tell us where this goes.
Where this goes, it's to be determined. So the wonderful thing about the timing of this, it's much like in 2017, Doug, where I was still fairly new to the Community Foundation and wanted to listen and learn to figure out how we could use the information that we gathered about community needs to influence and shape our grant making. Our grant making framework generally. So it not just the $100,000 that we're allocating to Community Action Awards, but the $10 to $12 million that we have discretion over, direct discretion over. It influenced that framework, but also the Community Foundation disperses on average $60 to $70 million per year. Mm-hmm. And so much of what we get to do, either directly or in partnership with our fund holders, is influence their thinking about community needs or their understanding of community needs. And so part of what the Community Action Awards will do is give us another insight into what community needs are, what's top of mind in terms of community action. And it will inform our forward-leaning strategy as we're moving as an organization into strategic planning. It'll help to sharpen our thinking about, again, broad community needs, broad community engagement, data collection, and the role of a community foundation when it comes to offering data as a public good, but also doing more things to connect and build community.
So will there be an on the table conversation next year?
To be determined. We'll see. Okay. We'll see. We may be. It depends on everything.
We can get together. How's that?
Right. It just depends on whether we'd be able to get together in person. Of course, we're going to be in virtual conversations in the first part of the year. I think it all to be determined.
Great. Well, Tonia, thank you so much for, again, inviting Leadership Greater Washington to be part of this great effort. I thought it was a great success, a great kickoff, great first year. And I'm very hopeful that we continue to do this and we grow it the way Chicago did. I think it could be very helpful to leaders in the region. It certainly can be very helpful to the elected officials in the region to get another set of information on what their constituents are thinking.
Absolutely, Doug. There's a question in the chat box.
Yeah, I want to switch a little bit from that
Okay.
to
Perfect.
a question from Bob McCartney with the Washington Post. And he's interested in what you think about how the fall and winter are looking in terms of food, housing, and health for marginal communities in the region. How bad's it looking now that federal relief has run out and COVID infections are rising again and the economy seems stuck? So he clearly is, he's clearly not optimistic about the next few months. But why don't you? He wants to hear from you, Tony. Go ahead.
Sure. So thanks for the question, Bob. I tell you a couple of things that are keeping us up at night on our end. One, of course, it is around food security. It's, if Congress can't put together a relief package, we're really, really worried about the end of the eviction moratoriums. There's an estimate that as many as 40,000 households in our region could be, they're severely behind on rent payments, and there's pressure on the resident side and a lot of pressure, of course, on the landlord side. And so a relief package would give us time to figure out solutions, both federal solutions, local solutions, philanthropic and individual solutions. And I'm nervous that pushing that to the beginning of the year, it's going to be incredibly tricky and challenging for families. On the food security side of things, the concern remains the same, particularly in places that we knew were already disproportionately impacted, but also in places where workers live, because the cost of living is so expensive in the district now. They are also being impacted. So people don't think about Montgomery County sometimes when it comes to food insecurity, but the numbers are incredibly high for our region there. Doug, you know this, and Fairfax, along with wards 7 and 8 and Prince George's County. So the entire region is really severely compromised because people are returning to work slowly, but we don't know when things will get back to whatever normal our new normal will be. We need to get a deal. I can't say that, I can't stress that enough, so that we can buy some more time for the economy to return to some level of normalcy and people to get back to work.
It really is so troubling. It's a sin if all the federal government did was just sort of push off the pain for a few months. That the pandemic, the recession, all of that, if they're just going to let that fully hit us in the winter,
Right.
the fall and winter, where it's just going to be a lot tougher for people, and COVID's going up, and they do need a deal. We do need a deal, and we need to think big, because until we get COVID under wraps, we're not going to get the economy back. Anyway. So it could be a very tough winter for a lot of families and people in the region, and I hope that's not the case. I hope that they do come through and make a deal, but let's hope. Any other questions from anyone before we say goodbye to Tonia? Here's another issue that we didn't talk about. And it's really, I'm always thinking about this, even though I'm not in local government anymore, is the impact of state and local budgets and the cuts they're going to have to come up with. I mean, the private sector is looking at cutting off a lot as well,
Right.
a lot of charitable giving, but state and local governments are really taking a beating. There's been some push by the House of Representatives to give them a package of funds to help them get through this. It doesn't seem to be going anywhere at this point, but I think that's part of what needs to be. If you're going to go big, you need to you have to go big. Going big means you have to help the state and local governments. But until then, it's going to be very tough times for people who are expecting human services from their local governments and their state governments, and it's just not, the money's not there.
Absolutely. I can't stress it enough. I mean, there is another thing that we can do from an advocacy perspective is, you know, to lean in as much as we can. Again, so many, the attention is turned completely now to federal elections, but we still have the opportunity to press our representatives and members of Congress to do whatever it takes to make a deal so that people in our neighbors in our community can be protected, again, now and for the period ahead. I mean, it was the CARES Act that really helped to stabilize many of the nonprofits in our region and people in our region. And we need another package in order to be able to make it through the next period.
And as you said, if we don't get that, we are looking at rising evictions, horrendous evictions, a lot of food insecurity, a lot of health issues,
right?
With the rising COVID and continued loss of employment and loss of income. So let's hope they get it together. Huh?
I'm hoping they will. You know, we have to be on the optimistic side of this thing. And we have to push them, not just hope, but also, you know, push, encourage, call, knock on doors, or, you know, virtually blow up their phones until they can feel the pressure to act. And again, you know, I've been in conversations, Doug, with members, our congressional delegation over the last couple of weeks. They're anxious about this. I mean, I don't want to suggest at all that people are sitting around twiddling their thumbs. There's a lot of, you know, effort going into trying to strike a deal. But, you know, I think it goes without saying, you know, most of us around this phone know where our politics are right now. So, but we can't let up the pressure.
Well, there's a lot of pain coming. As I said, it'd be a sin if all they did was just push things out a few months as opposed to really trying to tackle and solve what's in front of us. So in the meantime, we can apply for community action grants through you all. We can do little things and not so little things to help our neighborhoods, to help our neighbors. And I encourage all of you to do that. So Tonia, thank you very much for doing this. Thank you for the Community Action Award Grant Program. And I look forward to being part of that. And we will publicize this as much as you can within LGW and try to get some of our members to apply for them or to get the word out to have others apply and to make this a very successful program for you.
Thank you, Doug, and thank you, LGW community, for your ongoing support to the Greater Washington region.
Thank you, Tonia. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming in. That's it for today. Tomorrow, we've got a Frontline Conversation with Nikki Gorn from the Meyer Foundation. So please join us for that. I'm looking forward to that. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.